Welcome back to the show and to a new week of many firsts. We'll look into first news about the Pfizer vaccine, and we also seen the first president who refuses to concede an election. Last when we left it off, we didn't yet know who would be the president-elect in the United States. We now know that Joe Biden is the winner. And while this is in no means a show about politics, who operates at the highest level of office in the United States hugely affects the development of technology and how we operate with our businesses and how countries collaborate and educational or other tech companies are invited in to be able to scale in a new country. We saw for a while, that Donald Trump and Elon Musk had a huge flirtation happening, but that seemed to have cooled off and was soon replaced by Kanye West, which also seemed to cool off after a while. But I just want to briefly touch upon a story in Science Mag. So we're 10 weeks away from the inauguration of Joe Biden, and the first thing he's sort of staking his presidency on is this COVID-19 plan, the pandemic plan of how they'll stop the widespread of the coronavirus in the United States.
Mm-hmm. A first good move.
It seems like it's a unifying move, but it's also a difficult move. So U.S. President-elect Joe Biden, so he has put forward a timeline of how he'll deal with the coronavirus. He's also named 13 scientists and health specialists to this new COVID-19 Special Advisory Board. And we, for example, I think that's a move he stole from big businesses and tech. Like, when we're building CanopyLAB, you always make this advisory board around you of like the best people around that know about tech, that know about transport and logistics. And so I see that it's a very tech move he's making. It's a very business move for a president. But then I think what's difficult about the United States, both when you operate as a president and you have to make policy, but also when you're a business, is that each state has quite a lot to say about how they operate. So, the article states that that Biden will sort of try to really convince the states that they should operate according to his plan, because he knows that ultimately he doesn't decide. But the coronavirus, is hitting some of it's hitting a peak in the United States. On Monday, we saw 237,000 people infected. So this is really the time where something needs to happen. And it's interesting also because we've heard the announcement from Pfizer that we are actually close to having a vaccine. There's been so many talks. Are we close? Are we not close? Are the Russians close? But I think also with the Pfizer announcement, I hope that Joe Biden will also look more into like logistics and adding a logistics team to his advisory board. Because what we know with any product, delivery is key. And it turns out with the COVID-19 vaccine that it actually, unlike any other vaccine, has to be kept at a minus 70 Celsius.
Wow.
Minus 70.
That's cold.
I mean, it's really, really cold. And apparently it can be taken out of that frozen stage only 4 times. So when you think about not just like, I'm thinking like sub-Saharan Africa, how the hell are we going to deal with that? But even within the United States, there isn't an existing infrastructure. If we already had a vaccine that acted in the same way, we would have had an infrastructure at like, general practitioners' offices and stuff like that, where you could just like transport it there and have it stored in the proper way. But that whole infrastructure doesn't exist. So I think we'll see that the president-elect will have to call for tech for solutions for manufacturing companies. And ultimately, helping distribute a vaccine will be the ultimate collaboration of humankind that we've ever seen before.
Yeah. And Biden is actually on his way to prove that some people knows better than Trump, where he used to say, no one knows better than me. Well, yes. Now some people know better than you.
Actually, there is an advisory board of people who just do that. And probably their main sentence is not that nobody knows anything more than vaccines than me.
Yeah.
But how has the market then responded to the news of the Pfizer vaccine? TechCrunch brought an article called 5 VCs Discuss the Future of Software as a Service. and software after Pfizer's vaccine breakthrough. So basically, the thing is, we've seen the stock market and general investments in tech have been sort of shifted upside down. When COVID hit us, some industries almost died overnight, like air, like travel by air, tourism, the hotel, the entire hotel industry, experiences, all of that sort of almost died out overnight. But a lot of investment went into these software as a service companies that build, for example, the infrastructure for future of work. So we're seeing like Slack and Teams and Hangouts and Zoom. While these companies had pretty large market saturation already, the massive shift from home meant that they've been getting crazy, lots of investments. So, if the vaccine comes now, it seems like it will. We have to figure out how to distribute it. How fast will it be? What's the distribution key? Who gets it first? Sick people, old people, not sick people? Nobody knows. So how will it actually influence the investment dynamics? And it seems like most of the investors are so actually, like when it came out that Pfizer was this close to actually releasing the vaccine, we saw a surge in the stock exchange in companies that have been majorly suffering. We saw even, I think, Boeing went up. Yeah. So it's like airlines, cruise companies, and Boeing, their shares just like skyrocketed. Or I mean, they didn't. They went up. They should be happy. They went up, not down. But actually, a lot of software as a service companies, their stocks went down in price.
I've been doing some investing recently, but I'm a tech guy, so I'm investing like mainly in tech companies. And the moment they came out with the announcement for the vaccine, like most of the tech shares just went like rapidly down. People were like, okay, we're going back to normal. We don't need that much tech now. Let's figure out a way.
But I think that definitely, so if you are a tech investor, it's definitely premature to assume that we'll go back to what people call a post-pandemic world. First of all, as we already touched upon, the infrastructure has not been figured out. The distribution key has not been figured out. We know very little about the vaccine, how it will be distributed. We know that Joe Biden, the president-elect, has said that it will be free in the United States. But I think that we have to remember what happened when everyone was trying to buy face masks.
Yeah.
Modern day piracy.
Yeah.
We even, so I've been doing a lot of business in Peru. I remember getting a call from one of our advisors. He was really upset. He had just been in a meeting with the president of Peru. And this story, I never actually saw it hit the news cycle. But apparently Donald Trump stole over a million face masks from the Peruvian government because the plane landed in the United States to refuel before it was supposed to hit Peru.
And it never took off.
It took off empty. And while that story never hit the news circuit, another one just like it did. The United States confiscated over 200,000 face masks that were going from Thailand to Berlin. And the German government was quite vocal. I think it was around July, saying, that they had also done a modern act of piracy and stolen 200,000 face masks. So if we can't distribute face masks without countries stealing them from another, what will things be like with the vaccine? If it's Pfizer, what's their distribution plan in distributing them outside the United States? So it'll be a huge shit show. It'll be quite interesting to see, what happens with that. So if you have been investing in future of work, I would continue doing that. But also almost all studies indicate that there's a significant shift happening and that a lot of people like to work from home. So it's an illusion to think that a vaccine comes and then everything just goes back to normal. I even saw a study just in Denmark yesterday where about 30% of the population said that they're not in a hurry to go back to travel overseas after the vaccine comes. So people have been changing their consumption patterns. We've never seen as many summer houses being sold in Denmark. It's the first time in history this many are being sold. So people are actually majorly changing their consumption patterns, and we don't really have any idea how that's going to pan out after a vaccine hopefully is released and works.
Redefine what's normal, because why would you go back to how it used to be, since
Exactly.
there's so much development in what, like, there's positive things in this whole situation, so we can only change to something better. Why
Exactly,
going
and
back?
stuff. If you're investing in, if you're investing in Slack, if you're investing in, like Teams or anything in the EdTech, anything in the future of workspace, HR tech, I don't really see a reason. We're seeing sort of a mass adoption of that, and I think we have to remember. In the last 24-hour news cycle, we've seen quite a lot of articles stating that New York is about to be hit by the second wave, maybe within 24 hours.
Poor people.
So, and they're even considering closing schools again. We're also seeing, I read an article this morning that states sub-Saharan Africa has barely implemented any e-learning yet. So while this, the pandemic gave us reason to faster adopt new technology, it's not like we're going to throw it out afterwards.
No.
We actually figured out that some people are more productive working from home. We actually figured out a meeting doesn't have to take an hour. It can actually be 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour. So we have majorly changed already. I think we just don't know how much yet.
Yeah.
One of the countries that has changed quite a lot under the recent years is India. So Quartz India has an article called "India is benefiting from the digital payments war between the world's largest tech firms." So as new economies are coming online, all the big giants, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, all of them are battling to take the biggest market share. And sometimes people benefit from that. So in India, the transition to mobile and online banking has actually accelerated quite a bit. So India's mobile payment space has turned into an intense battleground between big global tech players like Google, Amazon, Walmart, Facebook. All of them want a piece of the pie. So why is India interesting? India's interesting because in 2015, if you had 1,000 people, only 73 of them had mobile banking or internet-based banking.
Whoa.
Today, it's 1,265.
Oh, they're getting there.
So it's actually out of 1,000, meaning that people will have more than one account, which is what we saw with mobile phones in the emerging economy for a while too, right? That people all of a sudden had more, that they had 1 point something mobile phones per person.
Yeah.
Now we've learned to integrate them better, or with like dual SIM and stuff like that. So it's a massive market, and it's a market where people are still coming online. So they're projecting that the Indian mobile banking market will grow as fast as we saw in the sub-Saharan Africa and Asian mobile market. So everyone's trying to get in there first. And it's like sometimes, in tech, you see these things that happen at the same time that makes it kind of magical. Because in India, they've always loved bills. Like they love paper money. And the thing with paper money and the global pandemic, it doesn't mix well. So I remember when the pandemic came out, I had just been in Vietnam and I was in New York. And I'm at the airport. And first of all, we were struggling to get out of the United States. So I was sitting in the United States when Trump announced, like, we're closing the country on Thursday. And I'm like, shit, I think my ticket out is on Thursday, which it was. It was like at 10 p.m. So I'm like, the plane can really not be late because I don't want to get stuck in the United States. And then I was at the airport and I had all this, cash left. And then I went up to the register and the woman, she just looked at me like, you're going to pay with like bills, you're going to pay with money. It's just, remember those first like very chaotic days when the pandemic hit. And I was like, well, I don't want to get stuck with this money. And there was a guy next to me who was like outraged. And he said, he interjects himself in the conversation and said, how many people are actually still paying with bills? And she said like less than 10%.
These
like,
Asian
at
artifacts.
Starbucks,
Yeah.
she's like less than 10%. But that was a crazy time. I remember everyone started wearing mittens, like regular mittens, not like plastic. And when we got in the plane, people would like get the sanitizer and they were just wiping the chair and the ventilator, like everything, where I was just like, be careful, but we're still gonna sit like this close to each other, for like a while. So that's just a little optimistic. No, the Indian space is super interesting. It's a market that's difficult. I've done some work in India, and first of all, the Indian market's interesting because they'll do anything they can to cheat the system. And like, I'm not trying to say that to be discriminatory. I love people that cheat the system. There's a reason why big tech companies often do like a competition, you know, like, can you make our algorithm better? Like, you know, I think it was actually Netflix that did that at some point. Like, can you make our recommendation better? Can you do something? So I love people that try to cheat the system, challenge the system. But in India, for example, in EdTech, they'll do anything to try to hack the system to get a better grade. So that's like one of the things they always do. Another thing is it's a notorious B2C market. So normally when I've been involved in ventures, it's normally like B2B, but the B2C market's pretty well developed. But if you try to go in, for example, with a learning solution at a school, a lot of times the schools, they don't 100% know who the students are in terms of their ID, and they often don't actually have an email address for every student. So what they often, you know, advocate is that we should try to make, for example, learning platforms, a B2C model where the end user pays. And that's extremely tricky, but it's also sometimes like borderline unethical. So I've had a bunch of universities pitch to me. They're like, we'd love to use, you know, the software that I've developed in CanopyLAB at our school, but we don't want to pay for it. We want to put all the information our students need to know behind a payment wall, and then you can charge whatever price you want and give us a part of the cut. And then if they don't access it and they don't pay, they don't know what classroom to show up to at school. So it's just like the market there works really differently. So of course the big tech giants are competing for it, but it requires really unique understanding of the Indian market to be successful in India. And I know that, for example, the Danish embassy there, if Danish companies try to go to India, a lot of times they're like, you really have to do your research. I knew there was a Danish EdTech that tried to go to India, and they had a mobile-based text message-based application. And we've known that text message-based applications have been wildly successful a lot of places in Africa, where they haven't had enough internet. So for example, a lot of edtechs that do math over a text message have succeeded during the pandemic. The problem in India is that there's so much spamming, so many like scamming and phishing where they're trying to get your money, that the providers will shut down someone who sends over, let's say, 1,000 text messages a day.
Oh, wow.
So if you're working with a school, and a school in India can easily have like 20, 30, 50,000 students.
You're going into spam folder.
Yes. So they put them out of business constantly. Or they found out that they would put them out of business. So they're like, the model you have will not work for India. So you really, you know, that's why it's only the giants fighting there. There's no like small provider trying to take it. Because, or unless maybe we'll hear of a local one eventually, but it is a super tricky space.
Yeah, it's a very interesting market.
It is. And India, moving on to the next story in India today, India has become one of the most dominant nations in EdTech. So when we talk about unicorns, traditionally we had only seen the United States and China have EdTech unicorns. And then we saw Byju's come out of India, and India's gained this very prominent placement in creating educational tech. India Today has released an incredibly interesting article called Important Tech Trends That Will Reshape Indian EdTech in 2021. So while the story is about the biggest trends in learning in India, I think looking at that market that has some of the biggest learning companies and biggest pool of users is very interesting in terms of predicting global trends. So if we look at India, India has, like every other country, the EdTech industry has benefited from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think there's no reason to pretend they haven't benefited. It sounds like terrible to say it, but whatever crisis happens, there are always people that benefit financially and people that don't benefit.
Yeah.
And a recent KPMG study of India showed that there's now over 3,500 EdTech companies, like startups, operating out of India. And that the Indian EdTech market could be worth as much as 1.96 billion in 2021.
Wow.
In 2021,
Wow.
Just India. There's a reason why our investors keep telling us, like, when are we going to India? India's complicated. We are looking at India. India's super complicated, but it's if you get it right, you get it right. But the trends there are, of course, the first one, gamification. So the ability to make your EdTech solution more playful, that you curate people through the learning experiences in ways where they're nudged, they're given diplomas and badges. So I think this is a trend we've seen for like 5 years. It's not a super interesting new trend. But this whole incentive-based learning, more play-based learning, I actually see like, you know, to me, gamification has always been like the poor man's way of not making a game. So it's like we've seen, you know, other companies actually include, you know, the intersection of learning and gaming, they're almost coming together.
Yeah.
So of course you can gamify and make it more playful, but I actually think I think this is a bit old. I think the next wave will be integrations between learning and games. So if I'm about to learn something about economics or trade, I might as well integrate with a game where people, like World of Warcraft, you know, I can learn something through that immersive experience rather than just gamifying my way of reading a text about how to do trade.
True.
So I think we'll see, I think they're behind in India today, that we'll see this being pushed much further.
But it's also interesting how different the Indian mindset, at least the startup mindset, like how different it is than the rest of us. Because you have to be like with the proper mindset to recognize opportunity and to take leverage of it. So if Indians have made such a big change in EdTech, why aren't the rest? And what's the difference between Indian startups and the rest of the world?
So the Indian mindset to me is very much closer to what we see like an Indian parent or like an Asian parent. So we've seen a lot of people rise out of poverty that now constitute a much bigger middle class. And what's most important for them is for their children to do well in school and get a career. So parents are pushing a ton of money first into all this like tutoring, ensuring that their students are like online tutoring. I get a tutor, I'm not great at math. We know I need amazing math to you know, become a doctor. So the kind of the first wave was this tutoring. And now it's those very sort of content-heavy platforms that take you through the whole curriculum of med school, for example, right? Or medical school. So it's very much like the same as we see in the Asian market, these content-heavy platforms that are becoming super popular, but they're also hard to scale because they require such a heavy content bank, like a production, video production, PowerPoint production of the content for it.
Now I'm expecting to see the Indian version of Baby Shark.
Exactly. Yeah, they might as well. Yeah. So yeah, in many ways, it's like, you know, like this whole South Korean, like we're seeing in China. China's huge in EdTech, like that they're really pushing forward to be able to, like, because they're spending the money on behalf of their kids. Another of the trends that they're highlighting is artificial intelligence and big data. So actually in India and in China, I'd say they're better than the United States in creating this personalized learning experience so that they use your data to curate the learning experience to you. And for a long time, we've talked about that. People aren't very, you know, generally haven't been very good at it, but we've seen some examples come out of there. And of course, that's the ultimate hack. If you can find a way of curating the learning experience, again, I'm a parent. I want to spend whatever money it takes to make sure my son or daughter becomes a doctor. That's a lot of the mentality that still prevails.
Yeah, it is.
Then if you don't just get a platform that teaches me what I need to know, but that can identify what I know and what I don't know and make sure I spend my time right, then that's definitely where I want to put a bang for my buck. The final two big trends are generally about like cloud storage and software in the cloud. So we have to remember in a lot of these places, like I sometimes assume that all software is in the cloud, but we have seen a transition the last couple of years that some software still isn't in the cloud. So they need to make sure that all of the software is in the cloud and that the data is stored in the cloud. And the final, to me, most interesting is about wearables and simulation studios. So the use of augmented reality and virtual reality in teaching. That's going to be the next big thing. You know, virtual reality and augmented reality to me has had this promise forever, but a lot of it sucked for a while. And now it's gotten a lot better fast. But then the second hurdle has been the cost of the hardware. So we're talking about with the pandemic, there are tons of places still where they don't have internet, they're not going to school, they don't even have a basic learning platform. So if we think that like virtual reality learning is just around the corner from a global perspective, that's not the case. But we do see that the advancements have been there, the ability to drive down the cost. I mean, it is like, it is coming and we're getting there. But I think most important thing that we have to remember is actually not about the tech and it's not about the price.
What is it?
It is about virtual reality sickness. Have you heard? Do you get sick when you use virtual reality?
I used to. When the first time I tried it, it was like a strange experience.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yes. So actually, like, virtual like reality sickness or the motion sickness you get from it, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's haunting me throughout, even though I try to like push up my tolerance. So I remember the first time I tried virtual reality, it's like 8 years ago. I was at a friend's house for a birthday party, and he was one of those like really early movers that had gotten this equipment. It was majorly expensive. And I tried, almost one of the most famous where it's the roller coaster. And, I had been drinking, so that didn't help. And I put them on, and it was like this crazy roller coaster. And I actually fell backwards. Like I fell all the way backwards because I felt so sick.
Wow.
And it's common that some people feel nausea, they have to throw up, they get dizzy. So they generally feel just like motion sickness if you get it in general. But now, I have some classes at home, and there I can do like 5 to 7 minutes and then I get sick. Whereas like my husband, he can keep them on for like all night. Or even maybe sometimes after like an hour, he just feels a little bit like loss of sense of direction.
Yeah.
But my son, Elliot, who loves whales and dinosaurs. We've been doing this like very scary one with dinosaurs. He can do the same as me, like a couple of minutes, and then he begins to I have to kind of like hold him and make sure he doesn't fall. So actually, if we're saying that there's a future of our virtual reality, how are we actually going to handle it when it seems like there's a significant portion of the population that suffers from virtual reality sickness?
Yeah. I had a funny experience. Back in the years, I used to work at the Danish Technical University, and we did this like showroom presenting people with virtual reality and to experience it. Like these were the earliest years of virtual reality, and there was a student who got on the roller coaster you're talking about. It was on a PlayStation, and he had such fun. He was like. It was something natural to him. He had fun. He didn't have any problems with it. But then his mother was with him, and he asked her to put the goggles on. The moment she put them on and we launched the roller coaster, she started tripping like it's another universe. She started losing herself. Like it wasn't just scary. It was scary and something more. It was like a complete different experience to her body. So it was very strange.
And actually, I think that's interesting because I know in Denmark there have been studies that have shown the successful use of virtual reality with vulnerable groups as a form of therapy. But I think that there's so much around that. We just designed some chatbots at CanopyLAB, and we did a lot of the literature about how people who are a little bit vulnerable, if they see a chatbot and they think it's a real person. So some of our chatbots, our AI chatbots are modeled on me and our learning designer, Lisa. And because it's a real picture of a person, they might associate it with a real person. And the literature is super, very, very in agreement on this, that it's important that you don't give them the illusion of it being a real person, because they might also try to form a relationship with the bot or ask it things, even, if they begin to be like suicidal and things like that. So we both had to make it, there was an ethical choice about making it clear that this is not reality, but also we did quite a lot of work with putting in like mental health guidelines and COVID guidelines in our bots to make sure that they foster mental health. And I think that people who already have a difficult time could have a very difficult time if they work with virtual reality, and also children. When Elliot first tried virtual reality around 3, and I normally don't let him really use it, so sometimes I'll let him just see what it is, but he can't just like use it. Like you maybe give your child an iPad. He definitely at the age of 3 could not distinguish about that not being reality.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I'll say even now that he's 4, almost 5, sometimes he'll watch something on television and say, one day he's like, "Mom, can't you just do magic?" Or why can't you just snap your fingers and a cake comes like they do in the film? And then we have to explain like difference between reality. So I think that these formats can make it real difficult. And then there's a lot of like ethical discussions around like what age is it actually appropriate to be using this format with children. And I don't think that there's a kind of a universal answer to that yet. but it's exciting. In other exciting news, well, actually a little bit upsetting for me because I just got this new computer like a couple of months ago. But last night Apple had another unveil, and the event, which was called One More Thing. Apparently, because they've been dripping events all year. It's like, can you just decide what you're going to release this year or not? Like, you're having a third event.
They have some money to spend there.
Yeah, like what's going on here? They're like, well, one more thing we decided to do this year is actually release 3 new Macs. So I really regret having just gotten another one.
Yeah, me too. I also got one.
Yeah, you're going to get a new one. I'm considering getting a new one. You can always throw your computer at an intern and get another one for yourself. It's like one of those things, the small privileges of being the boss, right? Yeah. No, so of course, there is the fact that they're doing the Mini, the Air, and the Pro. But what's interesting about the story is actually about the chip rather than it's about the release of the new Macs. So obviously, they are arguing that the Air will be 3.5 times faster than its predecessor. But what it really is about is that they're going to, just like they've been doing for the watch and for the iPad and the phone, they're going to produce their own chips. The new M1, which will be more effective, it'll be faster, it'll be better.
Yeah.
But the price points will be around the same. Apple is definitely a company that's also benefited a lot from the pandemic. I know that at our office in Peru, we were trying to buy new computers, and Macs at one point were sold out for over a month.
Oh, what?
In the entire country. So you're just like, well, what? And we're like, when are you getting a new shipment? They're like, we have no idea. So these are some of the, both because there can be problems with production and problems with the logistic. Yeah. So, if a Mac gets sold out, imagine what the distribution will look like with the vaccine.
And they're getting closer to creating this whole Apple ecosystem and closing it down. So they cut their relationship with Intel. Yes. And Intel's been receiving quite some money so far from Apple for developing all of their chips. Exactly.
It's following up on a story we did last week also about Apple releasing their own search engine. We are really seeing them close the loop on their own universe, cutting out, in that case, they were cutting out Google for search. So we are seeing them closing around themselves in their own universe, both optimizing the hardware and becoming the owner and the producer of that, and then also cutting out, at least we suspect that they will completely cut out Google from providing the searches when you search on your phone.
Yeah. And it turns out now the new Apple computers, thanks to this new chip, they can't work with external graphic cards, which means huge companies like NVIDIA and others are now out of the game as well, which is like, if they succeed, okay, that's going to be a good thing because it's a lot of progress in the computer space. But if they don't and they cut all these relationships, then what happens with all these other companies and their money and their development? It's going to be crazy.
It is going to be crazy. Finally, if any of you have $75,000 laying around, you don't know what to spend on, you can now buy a Boston Dynamics Spot robot. That was you remember that creepy dog that's running around?
Yeah, the flimsy
That's the one. You can buy it for $75,000. And the 4-legged dog robot has actually been spotted. Both someone took it for a stroll in the street as if it was a dog. But it's been spotted in several locations doing odd things. One heroic Spot dog robot helped triage COVID-19 patients. Another one was spotted pulling a rickshaw. One was used as the world's most expensive doorstop.
Wow.
It's you spend $75,000 on a doorstop. One was seen hauling a box truck, and one finally was herding sheep. So it's a very multi-purpose robot dog. The reason I'm bringing this story is actually because we've seen in the last few days rumors that Boston Dynamics is going to, or is in talks about being acquired by Hyundai. So we're looking at a car manufacturing company that's in talks, facilitated by SoftBank, about buying Boston Dynamics, which is probably the world's most advanced robotics company. So you will know a couple of the robots already. You know Spot the dog, but also I think their second most famous robot is Atlas. And obviously I'm obsessed with Atlas because my youngest son is called Atlas. Atlas is the world's most human-like Cirque du Soleil robot. Like it's completely crazy. They call it the most advanced that was ever created. It's a research platform. It's a hardware. It jumps. It almost does a ballet. It can do all these absolutely fantastic things.
It's an athlete.
It's an athlete. So one wonders why are they doing that? Is it the least imaginative thing that they're doing it for the production line at the factory? Is it because they want to use some of the AI, the swarm intelligence, in optimizing their fleet of vehicles? Are they, we've seen both countries and cities make clear statements about, for example, in Germany, like there are certain cities that you won't be able to enter if you don't drive an electric vehicle, for example. So is this a move that they're going in that direction in order to use it for, to basically not strip it down because they're going to obviously still have the robots, but to strip some of the technology down and repurpose it in all different kinds of ways, which obviously is what they're going to do. But I think that we'll see that, and it just reminds me about this shift, that's happening, with not just with in the automobile industry, but in general. We're seeing, cities, countries that are making a move towards more green tech, about reducing emissions. And what does that actually mean for our consumption and what we buy? So I drive a Tesla. And while I love the car, I'm totally obsessed with the car. I love the small, weird things that Elon Musk does. Like there's the fart operator.
What?
So there's a fart thing. So you can, it's always when you get a new person in the car and they haven't heard about it, it's the best thing. So you can these fart pillows?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an imaginative fart pillow under each seat. So with the software out of the speakers on the side, you can make it fart. So it sounds like if you got in and sat next to me, I can press it and then it sounds like you're farting, for example.
That's so clever.
And then you can do a fireplace and you can do the moon landing. So they always have new stuff. In Christmas, there's always a Santa. You can get to jump on the screen and stuff like that. But still, so while I love the car, Elliot always felt we were never driving a real car. So when he was younger, if a car that made a lot of noise came by, he would be loving that car. Could be the oldest car, almost like a broke down car. He was car, it's making, it's brum, brum. It sounds like a race car. It sounds like a sports car. That's such a cool car. I really want that car, And then we became those terrible parents that were well, the people in that car are destroying the world because, it doesn't go, it's not electric. But the experience for him of what a car is, he equated that with sound. And I know, Georgie, that you know quite a lot about, there's some research going into sound and vehicles.
Yeah, actually, Audi recently, there was a news coming out from them that they are hiring a bunch of sound designers to actually make your car, your EV car, sounds natural, sounds like how you're used to hear of a car sound. So all the ambient noises from the road and the engine and the tires and everything that happens in a car, it's a very subtle noise, but it makes the experience of a car an actual experience. And with EV cars, we don't have that. So Audi is trying to tackle this problem and they're hiring a bunch of sound designers, which is also very interesting of how two completely different industries starts merging, where it's automotive production and then content production, which they have nothing to do with each other, and then they merge to create something better, which is very interesting.
Yeah. And that whole mind shift, I think we see that in a lot of different ways. So the other day I was dropping off Elliot and Atlas at their preschool, and there was another parent outside, and you could tell something was happening. She was struggling. So she had one of those, these cool bikes where she's biking her kids and they're at the front, this Christiania bike. But her key had gotten stuck in the lock. and she couldn't open it up. And she was like battling with it, and then she sees us coming out of the car, and she says, "Do you have any motor oil that I can borrow to kind of like try to get the lock out?" And I was just like, "No, like a Tesla doesn't like have a motor, like it doesn't have motor oil." But even that, that is another example of that these subtle things that we have this whole idea of these feelings and assumptions and notions of what a vehicle or what a car is like.
Yeah.
And she just like did not understand why I was just had to say no. I didn't go into this like long explanation. But our ideas of transport are being reimagined. In the last story I brought with us today from the Singularity Hub, there's a Dutch company that has created a flying car.
Oh, wow.
It cost $599,000. So that's kind of a lot. But it is now legal.
Oh, wait, is that the helicopter car?
It is like, it's kind of like a helicopter car. It's like this very pointy orange, like very ugly, sort of opposite of Tesla, which is like smooth and nice and pretty. And so it's called the PAL-V Liberty. And it's made by the Dutch company PAL-V. And as it says here, it looks like what you'd probably expect or imagine a flying car to look like. A cross between a small helicopter and a very aerodynamic car with a propeller on top. It can go up to 99 miles an hour. And in flight mode, its max speed is 112 miles per hour.
Yeah, I saw their demo video. What was interesting there that they showed the car driving on the road and flying, but they never saw the transition in between.
I know. I noticed that too, right?
Yeah.
So it makes you feel like, does it actually work?
Yeah.
And you're not sure?
Even if it is, I will only imagine that you have to get out and spend like 2 hours of setting up your car to take off.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, I thought this story to me was interesting because it reminds me of a lot of sci-fi we've seen since we're kids. Like even it gave me this like reminiscing of The Fifth Element, which is also this film with like Bruce Willis, but where the main actress, I can't remember her name, she's a model. She like jumps out of a window and there's just flying cars at all levels. And the city has been reimagined because it's not a city that has one level. It's a city with multiple levels. So for example, you might as well have a grocery store in the second level or the third level or the top level. Like anything can be anywhere. So to me, that was one of those moments from sci-fi that really made a huge impression on me. And I've continuously been disappointed with like our lack of ability. And we talked about flying cars forever, but nothing's been happening with it. So now something is happening with it. We've also seen huge advancements with drones, and much bigger drones, maybe drones we wouldn't even call drones. I know Georgie is a drone operator. I have a small drone at home as well.
Yeah, we actually have a news on that where DJI, the biggest manufacturer of drones, came up with their newest drone recently, which is like below the weight of what you're required to get a license. So you can fly this drone everywhere completely legally and do whatever you want.
Yeah, so in top news this week, sci-fi world is becoming a reality with flying cars and its exit to Trump, and congratulations to Joe Biden, president-elect. Thank you for watching.